So the first conference I'm going to talk about is the AAC, which is the American Athletic Conference, and they're not really insanely good, I guess. As I'm looking at it, they got Temple, who went 10-4, and they're all right, and then Houston, Navy, and Memphis as well. And this is more of a basketball conference, in my opinion. And just looking at the standings, it kind of backs it up. They only had one, two, three, four, five, five teams go over 500, and that's out of a 10 or 12 team conference. So not even half their conference went over 500. That's kind of not a good sign. And then looking at the bowl breakdown, they had in the bowls they were 2 of 8. The only two teams winning were Navy and Houston in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. And Memphis, with probably one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, didn't even win. I thought that was pretty interesting because everyone's like hyping up Paxton Lynch, and he couldn't even beat Auburn. And I'm kind of just going to go through here and talk about. I'm only going to talk about those three teams. I'm only going to be talking about Houston, Navy, and Memphis. They're all in the West. In the East, Temple looks really good. They're going to be an up-and-coming program. Cincinnati's, they're usually around 7-6, 8-5, kind of right around 500, a little bit higher. UConn, they're not really that good. East Carolina's not that good, and UCF is just awful. They went 0-12 this year. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about let me finish. Tulsa is never that good. Tulane's not that good, and SMU went 2-12. So I think if they recruit a little bit better, which is going to be tough since they're not a big program, they might be able to do something, but also it's just the AAC is not really that big and good recruiting schools. So I'm going to now talk about Houston, Navy, and Memphis, and I guess I'll start with Memphis because they kind of had a up and down kind of season. I mean, they won big when they needed to, and then they lost some games that they really shouldn't have. Like they beat Ole Miss, who was coming straight off the win against Alabama, so that was a big win for them. And they kept riding that hot streak until they ran into Navy when they were ranked 13, and the Navy beat them 45-20. Then they lost to Houston at back-to-back weeks, and then Temple, and then they blew out SMU. Then they made it to the Birmingham Bowl and played Auburn and lost. So I guess the biggest thing about Memphis is that they're an up-and-coming school, obviously. They had one of the best quarterbacks in the nation in Paxton Lynch. He's 6'7", huge arm, can run, Colin Kaepernick build, but seems to have a little bit better of a head on him, better football IQ. So I think that they're going to be, if he comes back, which I doubt he will, I think he's a senior actually, but I can't remember. I heard something that he's in the draft, so I don't think he's coming back. I think if their coach can keep recruiting and keep getting these really good quarterbacks and playmakers, they're going to be really good, and for a few years too, and not just like for a year or two, but they're going to be good for a while. So that's my thoughts on Memphis, and now I'm going to talk about Navy. Navy is I think they're led by Keenan Reynolds. He was one of the best running quarterbacks of all time. He set the record. I think he had 89 touchdowns in his career for setting the record for career touchdown, kind of like career rushing touchdown record. He set that record, broke it, and then some other guy was breaking it at the same time, played the game before him, and then he broke it again. So I thought that was really cool. I know that was hard logic to follow, but it makes sense kind of. He had it, someone beat him, and then he had it back again. So, but Navy's not traditionally a big name, really good program. They hold their own against bigger schools, kind of. I mean, they lost to Notre Dame, who they should have. Notre Dame won 41-24. And then they're beating all the schools that they should. Like I mentioned before, they beat Memphis 45-20. And then the only thing that really kind of bothered me about the season is that they lost to Houston 52-31. That's kind of where Houston got their name, because they beat a top 15 school, and how they got into the Chick-fil-A Bowl basically is they got their whole repertoire and reputation from that game, and then they got their I guess like their what would that be? I guess like their resume kind of got built from that game. So that's for a talk. That's for a talking point in just a moment. But Army did beat Navy in the Army Navy game. They won 21-17. And Keenan Reynolds, like I said, he broke the rushing touchdown record for career. But he did a lot of stuff for them. He threw the ball well. He did all that. He's a great quarterback, and I think he's going to do well in the next level if he stays at quarterback or if he moves to halfback. And then lastly, they made it to the Military Bowl. They were the military selection out of that bowl. They played Pittsburgh, Pitt Panthers, and they won 48-28. I think Navy is a good school for the moment. They have a good head coach. Their coach is really good. He knows how to talk up their team, recruit. He knows a lot of stuff. He was a highly sought after candidate for the BYU job and a couple other jobs, and he didn't take him. He wants to build Navy up, and I think that's a great thing for them. I think they're going to have a really good year, and they're obviously built for the future if they can get a quarterback at Keenan Reynolds' level, which is hard to do, but they've obviously recruited Reynolds, so they know what to look for in the future quarterbacks. So I think Navy's going to be up there for at least another year. Maybe they're going to take a year off and get back into it, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. Now moving on to Houston, like I said, they weren't really ranked at all this year, but like the first ranking showed up November 7th when they played Cincinnati, and they were ranked 25th. So I think Houston, I was kind of a sleeper on them. I didn't really think that they were really good coming out of the AAC, but they did manage to beat Louisville. They won that game 34-31, and that's a big deal because Louisville's a really good school every year. They got a new freshman quarterback who's going to be really good. I can't think of his name, but he's really good. I've seen him play, and he's got all the tools. He can run, he can throw, he's got all that stuff. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. And looking through the schedule, Houston kind of held their own, like went about their day with business and finished and won games they should have, and it kind of worries me that they kept Memphis this close, but obviously they were good. Houston's a good team, so they barely beat Memphis after they barely beat Cincinnati. Then the week after, they lose to UConn, who's, like I said, not a very good school, but they're more of a basketball school, but they're still pretty good. And then, like I mentioned before, they blew out Navy 52-31, so they figured out something within Case Keenum. And then Greg Ward Jr. kind of started to heat up and take control of his offense. He's one of the highly sought-after draft prospects. I believe he's a sophomore. I'll have to look. But he's really good. I think he's going to be one of the best quarterback prospects whenever he comes out in the draft. I know he's coming back next year. I know that for a fact because I saw a thing about it. So that's something to look out for with Houston. And so I'm going to move on to the games before I give the little projection for next year. They played Temple in the conference championship and beat them by 11. Temple's really kind of in the middle of everything school. They're not really great, but they're not really terrible. They're like I said, I think they went 10-4. They should be good. They're a good school, obviously. They won 10 games, so that's a big win for Houston. And coming off that, they got all the way to the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, where they were the big outside of Big Five, or no, I think they were the Big Five kind of selection just to go into that one. I don't know how all that bowl stuff works. But they played Florida State, and the one thing I want to touch on with this is they held Dalvin Cook to 33 yards, and almost no one did that when he was healthy. Yeah, some people did that when he was injured, but that was when he was injured. He was fully healthy for this game, and they held him to 33 yards. And I think that's really impressive to me, at least, because he's one of the best running backs in the country, and obviously Houston's have to have a good offense if they can do, or defense if they can do that. On the offensive side of the ball, Greg Ward Jr. kind of just carried their team. He had a touchdown, 238 yards, and a pick. He kind of led their rushing attack too, so I think they need to get a better running back or running system around him. And their defense is really suffocating. They got 4 picks on Florida State. So I think that's a little something to be looking at. There's off Sean McGuire, who had almost 400 yards. So I think Houston's more of a better rushing defense than passing defense, obviously. So I think the AAC is in a good way, or in a good spot now going into the next season. They got at least two teams that can contend in Houston and Memphis if Memphis keeps their guy, like I said. So I think AAC is something to be not sleep on, and we're going to see what happens in the future here with them. So, and I'm going to move on to another conference, which is the